Hey everyone, greetings. You know when something really important is going to happen sometimes when all the technology gods conspire to prevent it, which is what the wonderfully patient and also heroic Dr. James Thorpe and I have just been through, but I worked through with Dr. Thorpe's wonderful participation in the technical issues. Now we're live, and I've got him for the whole period of time I promised, and it's an incredible story. And I'll tell it. I'll give him the microphone in just a minute. But first, I want to remind you how distinguished this this incredible, literally hero. There aren't enough words to say hero of the lockdown era. Is the one OBGYN joined by maybe a couple, years later, but the one who spoke up consistently, heroically, at great cost to himself and his family for mothers and babies and pregnant ladies. And he is with the wellness company. He is the chief of maternal and prenatal health. He's focused on optimizing outcomes in women of reproductive age, pregnant women, preborns, and newborns. All human life begins in the womb, says his bio. It has been said in medicine that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. In his specialty of obstetrics, this is an understatement. Regarding optimization of maternal health prior to conception and preborn life in the womb, an ounce of prevention is worth 2 tons of cure. That's interesting. If we want to optimize outcomes in children, it starts in optimizing maternal health prior to conception and optimal preborn fetal growth and development in the womb. A maternal fetal medicine specialist of incredible distinction, a long and resplendent career, someone who was attacked by his own hospital for standing up to protect women and babies from the mRNA injection. Dr. Thorpe, am I leaving out anything else you want to add?
You're very kind and generous introduction. And the fact of the matter is that Dr. Wolf, you have been advocating for the exact same issues from the very start. And this movement, especially, it's being so ignored in obstetrics, and really without your huge platform, I think this would be even more suppressed than it is now. It's just unbelievable that so few remain silent, and you're one of the very, very few individuals that have really platformed these concerns, and for that I'm so grateful for you, Dr. Wolf.
Thank you. Well, we're a great team, but I would also just note that, as kind as your words are, I'm not an obstetrician. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm just an English major, and there's nothing like an actual expert in fetal maternal medicine to stand in the breach and to issue the warnings that you've issued. So thank you for your kind words, but it definitely took both of us and the handful of other people who seem to care about mothers and babies. And that's a whole other subject that someday I want to talk to you about for a full show, which is, how could humanity give up? Well, let me start with that. Why do you think humanity stood aside and didn't care about mothers and babies, its own future? What's your take on that?
Yeah, it's very disturbing. What's very disturbing is really the totalitarian society. We're celebrating our 250th, but the fact of the matter is that we are not a constitutional republic anymore. And anybody that doesn't realize that, over the last 6 years, I define totalitarianism, and you've written a lot on this, so you're really the expert, but from my simple-minded view as a clinician, I view totalitarianism as a state in which the majority of its citizens know the truth. They know the government is spreading a lie, yet they remain silent. Evil flourishes when good people remain silent. And that's what's happening now. We see that that my three societies in pregnancy, ACOG, American College of OBGYN, ABOG, and Society for Maternal Fetal Medicine, they're all pushing the shots, COVID-19 shots in pregnant women. And
to this very day.
Mm-hmm. But the American people know better. You know, the uptake is a pathetic single-digit uptake, according to some experts. So that means at least 80 to 90% of Americans know it's a lie. They know somebody that's been killed or injured, but they remain silent, Dr. Wolf.
Shocking. And it's also shocking to me that those professional organizations, even under an administration in which our health agencies are led by Robert F. Kennedy Jr., are still recommending this horrifically dangerous shot to pregnant women. I mean, how can it, from a regulatory perspective, how do you think that happened, or how is that allowed to continue, that situation?
Well, my opinion is that I voted for Trump 3 times, but he's lost a lot of my respect because of this exact situation. And I believe that he sold out. I believe that he cut the legs off of Bobby Kennedy. He used him. These are my opinions, and mine only. But from my perspective, it felt like we made about 2 or 3 steps forward. We have this new committee, ACIP committee, and for the listeners, that's the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, with some very, very talented people, many of my friends and well known to me. And all of a sudden, we have this rogue judge, Brian Murphy, who basically judges on this lawsuit from the American Academy of Pediatrics against HHS and disbands all the progress that we made. Wow. And all the childhood immunization schedule that was modified to be more consistent with our peer nations. Everything's been lost, all the gain. And I blame that on Trump or Susie Wiles, his controller. And I'm very angry about that. And I think that the evil forces, what I call the beast, which is really money, power, and control, that's what Trump seems to be all about. And he's not going to go against the mRNA and these vaccines. Why? Because this is a $1.7 trillion per year industry, the pharmaceutical cartel globally. Now, just put that in perspective. It's about 4 or 5 times larger than the military budget.
Wow.
The whole illegal drug cartel, the Median cartel, how brutal this is, these drug cartels globally, the entire global illegal drug cartel is only 0.5 trillion per year. So that the pharmaceutical companies globally are 3.5 times more profitable.
Unbelievable.
So that's the problem, is Trump is sold out to money, making deals, growth of the economy. And he's not going to let AI go, because he's not going to let mRNA grow, because they own pretty much everything.
Right. Well, you've hit on something important. I mean, it's hard to assess, right, President Trump's, intentions and even his agenda, because there is so much vacillation. It seems like, as you said, 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, and it's very hard to see a clear through line. So you're right to assume there are many different competing interests, and that the pharma shills definitely are in the ascendancy in some ways, clearly. I guess what you're touching on too is that President Trump from the very start has kind of showcased his relationship with big tech, and the big tech bros from Silicon Valley are the owners of the mRNA IP and of the vaccines. They make the money. I was astonished in my research to find out that Google owns a vaccine and Facebook owns a vaccine, and the funders of Facebook's founder has a foundation that funded the vaccine, and the ties are like this.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah, it's really interesting.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's shocking. And so that's why you got this coordinated messaging at the beginning of the lockdown. And then when the mRNA injection was rolled out, because there was something called a COVID-19 project, which was like Bloomberg, Facebook, Amazon, Google, Meta, all the big tech people in bed with each other, coordinating their messaging to say, get your shot, get your shot. Well, that's answered a lot. Part of me can't even bear to accept that, money, influence, power, and even carrots and sticks, as we saw, could explain almost every obstetrician in America turning his or her back on mothers and babies. Like that, it just seems like, okay, if you're not willing to save that elderly person, in the crosshairs of this horrible injection, there's an unborn baby or a newborn baby or a woman who's just gotten pregnant, for Lord's sake, save the baby, because the baby can't speak for himself or herself, right? But that didn't happen. Do you have any thoughts about that before we move on to the blood supply?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, I can remember really, I think we've talked about this many times before, privately and on your show, that how the administration, I remember in the early years of the Biden administration, the chief of staff of the White House, Jeffrey Zients, the head of the NIH wasn't Francis Collins, and then also Vivek Murthy. I can remember that they essentially hired out the individual that was the lifelong, professionally long member of HHS, and his focus was how to change America by PR.
Wow.
What was his name? Mark, a Harvard professor. He in the turnstile fashion, he retired from that organization, and then he wrote an independent article bragging about how his efforts were able to push millions of vaccines on Americans. His famous quote was, "We got to go for the lower hanging fruit." Remember that? The whole thing was a psyop. They went after faith leaders, every religion. They went after the pharmacies. They went after the hospitals. They went after the doctors. They went after the influencers. Mm-hmm. They owned the media. Yeah. It was just unbelievable.
You're right. And yet, even with all of that, I mean, we could, tear this to bits, for hours, but even with all the psyop force in the world, tiny, helpless baby in mom's stomach. Like, you have to be a monster to let yourself be so brainwashed or so intimidated that you're going to not speak up for the baby, right? Like, although I guess a lot of pro-life people would say pro-choice people have been doing that forever, but I hear you. I still can't forgive, and I especially can't forgive the obstetricians. And I'm very surprised if they ever get the full confidence of their patients back in this generation, because women must be, who are having a second baby or whatever, when the first baby wasn't saved by the obstetrician saying, don't take this experimental injection or wait till there's more evidence, those moms are going to be, very nervous around their obstetrician. Have you heard anything about that? I mean, how are relationships between mothers and OBGYNs these days in the wake of the great sacrificing of?
I think some of them are, many patients, I don't know what percentage, 10 or 20, might be real concerned. I think that everybody has lost confidence in all of your physicians, all of the physicians. And I personally, I used to have pretty high regard for the healthcare workers and my physician colleagues, but I'll tell you right now, I have more respect for used car salesmen than I do physicians. I really do. It's patient betrayal. They betrayed their physician-patient relationship. Go back to that poor mom, in that waiting room, in the exam room, maybe with her husband, maybe by herself, and her first prenatal visit. And she's going in to talk to Dr. Smith, and she has the utmost confidence in everything Dr. Smith says. But guess what? That most intimate relationship with her obstetrician was false, because the government, the hospital, the American College of OBGYN, the American Board of OBGYN were talking through that doctor, were influencing that doctor. It wasn't Dr. Smith. It was the government. And that was their plan. And it's so horrible.
Paying some of them, right? Your wife confirmed that there were payments going to these professional organizations representing OBGYNs as well, and all the way down to the doctors. Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Was there more you wanted to say about that?
No, it's just that it was a facade, and that they weren't talking their obstetrician. You don't remember the talking points. The government and the American College of OBGYN printed up talking points for the obstetrician.
Unbelievable.
Talking points about the COVID vaccine. It's just, it's awful.
Yeah. Well, and that sets the stage for what is so newsworthy about our subject today. And I'll just tell people it's about the blood supply. And Dr. Thorpe has some really important, public service announcements about mRNA and the blood supply. Before we get into that, Dr. Thorpe, I just want to tell a tiny anecdote. I had surgery a month ago, and I've had a miraculous recovery, which is another subject, thank God, but it was quite scary. And because I had a very severe reaction to the anesthesia. But what I want to tell you is that before I went in, it was for hip surgery. I looked into, how do I get pure blood or unvaccinated blood, or how do I store my own unvaccinated blood in the event that something goes wrong in the operating room and I need a transfusion, because I didn't trust the blood supply. And it was very, very difficult. In New York, there are a couple of entities that will store your blood, but you have to get your doctor's prescription. It has to be more than 7 days before the surgery. And there are real problems with storing. And the hospital I was at kind of made it clear that they weren't going to help, basically, that this was something that was not part of what they did, which was scary for me, honestly. So over to you. What's going on with mRNA and the blood supply? When credible doctors start paying attention to purposed medications, it's really worth asking why. Dr. Harvey Risch, who's a friend of mine, I adore him, a friend of mine and Brian's, former professor of epidemiology at Yale, and now serving on the president's cancer panel, is helping lead that conversation. A new groundbreaking observational study from the wellness company analyzed the off-label use of ivermectin and mebendazole in nearly 200 cancer patients treated by licensed doctors across cancers such as breast, prostate, lung, and colon cancers. And the results are hard to ignore. After 6 months, 84% of patients experienced clinical benefit, including stable disease, tumor regression, no evidence of disease. This is not lab data. This is real-world patient experience. Dr. Risch, chief epidemiologist at the wellness company, called it an exciting signal deserving serious scientific investigation and more accessible, lower-cost cancer care options. God knows. I have some loved ones who are going through cancer treatment right now, and did you know it's the only treatment in which the oncologist gets a cut of the chemotherapy? It's shocking. perverse incentives. That is why the wellness company makes it easy to access an ivermectin and mebendazole formula using medications that are FDA approved for other indications and are being studied for additional use. That's what a second purpose means. It is doctor prescribed and USA compounded, so no weird overseas supply chain, designed to support these patients exploring these emerging approaches under medical guidance. Ordering is simple and fully digital. Just fill out a quick intake form, a licensed doctor reviews it, and your prescription ships directly to your door. Head to dailyclouthealth.com. Again, that's dailyclouthealth.com, and use code DAILYCLOUT to save up to $60 off plus free shipping. You guys have to do it. And what should we know about it? What news is there?
Well, the news is that we're about to publish a 2-part series. And this will be published in a peer-reviewed medical journal. And what we have done is I've approached it with, I'm the lead author. I've written it. Both parts are written. And we have multiple cases of patients being injured or killed from transfusions. Now, we can't say with 100% certainty that it was a blood transfusion that caused it, but there is just ample, a vast amount of independent sources and published literature, data that express the potential of these bloods being contaminated by blood donors who had the COVID-19 vaccine. It's contaminated by the mRNA itself or byproducts from the vaccine. So I think that you and I have known this for some time. You knew it, obviously, but I've been screaming about this for 5 years because why? Because of course your surgery is important, and I've had surgeries before. I've stored my own blood, 6 units before a major surgery in 1980, my first spinal surgery. But more important than me and the general population are pregnant women. It goes back to what you and I have been focusing on, and you and I have been very outspoken about pregnant women and preborns. Why? Well, a pregnant woman is 10 to 13-fold greater risk of requiring a transfusion. And when a pregnant woman gets a transfusion, it's not just affecting her, but it's affecting her preborn fetuses, maybe 1, 2, maybe 3 or 4. So the other thing is RhoGAM. RhoGAM, RHOGAM, and many of your listeners won't know what RhoGAM is, but the blood banking industry is an extension of the government. And they've made some horrible mistakes, and there's been many scandals globally with blood banks in the last 30 years. Many major countries, France, England, Australia, New Zealand, United States of America. But they make a lot of money when you donate blood. It's separated into multiple different components, plasma being one of them. So RhoGAM is a shot that a Rh negative woman may get at about 28 weeks gestation, just as she is entering the 3rd trimester. And it's used to prevent Rh disease, which used to be a real problem. And in fact, one of the focuses in my career was on Rh disease and other similar diseases. And we now are able to I spent done many fetal transfusions, giving blood to the fetus who was dying in the womb because of Rh disease. So RhoGAM, circling back to RhoGAM is a product that is derived from multiple different donors. In fact, one shot of Rogam, which might be half a teaspoon, 3/4 of a teaspoon, has blood from thousands of different blood donors.
Wow.
It's pooled plasma.
Okay.
So the most frequently asked question for me in the last 5 years is, Dr. Thorpe, is it safe to get my Rogam? And that's a very complex topic. But it's not just Rogam. It's plasma and all of these other derivatives of plasma pooled blood products, like, for example, IVIGG that you might have heard about. IVIGG is obtained from pooled plasma, and it's used for several different diseases. And in fact, that's not derived from, one dose of IVIGG is derived from not thousands, but tens of thousands of donors.
Wow.
Tens of thousands. So it's not like you're getting 1 unit of blood from one donor. If you get Rogam, you might be being exposed to 5,000 donors, or you get IVIGG, it might be 50,000 donors. So this is really serious stuff. And what am I concerned about? Well, you and I both know for sure, and we know many, many, many experts that know that shedding from the virus is a real entity.
Yeah.
I published on it before. You have, Dr. Pierre Corey, many physicians have.
Yeah.
We know that's a real entity. Well, if you can come within 6 feet of a person and be affected by what they're shedding, isn't it obvious that blood is going to be an even greater source than being in the vicinity of a vaccinated person, right?
I don't know what the mechanism of shedding is finally, but intuitively that sounds right.
Yeah. So here's what I know.
Mm-hmm.
I have vaccine injured patients that have had their last vaccine 5 years ago, and I can mention names, but I won't. But they're public, and you can find them on X. 5 years later, after vaccine, they have still massively elevated spike protein levels, antibody levels. And now, Nick Hulsher and colleagues, a friend of you and a friend of mine, they just published a paper. It was published in preprint, but it's published in a peer-reviewed medical journal now. And Dr. Wolf, what they've shown is what we all knew. There's mRNA remnants from the vaccine in patients for at least 3.5 years, at least. And not just mRNA, but spike protein as well. And there's many other concerns, the microclotting. Kevin McKernan is extremely concerned about this. And Kevin McKernan, as you know, is one of the geneticists, the DNA experts and RNA experts. He does sequencing. And, he's brought forth this issue of the plasmid circular DNA, which is a contaminant from the manufacturing process.
Right.
It has SV40 in it, which is a cancer promoter. But even more, there's many other issues, even prion disease, diseases that are caused by protein misfolding, such as Parkinson's, such as, Luc Montagnier talked about the strong concern he had for Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, CJD, which is kind of like mad cow disease. In fact, he reported 7 cases that accelerated very rapidly in 2021 and 2022 after the COVID vaccine. So, even the CDC admits that, they have some publications on prion disease and amyloid-like diseases. These are protein misfolding diseases, Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, and they admit, could occur. It could occur. This was before the vaccine. They say it could occur, and it might not be detected because their cleansing processes of this plasma, of course, are limited because they can't destroy the antibodies that are necessary for the components that the patients need. So these are my concerns. Why haven't the government screened? They can screen. Why hasn't the FDA and the CDC approved a direct spike antibody test?
Right.
Why don't they screen for the mRNA in blood donors before they donate? They won't, in my opinion, because if they do, the genie will be out of the bottle.
Right.
Can you imagine if they developed a quantitative spike protein test that you could go to CVS, Walmart, Walgreens, like you can a pregnancy test, and test yourself? Guess what?
Right.
The gig would be up. Everybody would know.
Yeah. Well, can I jump in with a couple of follow-up questions? I mean, you've said something so sweeping and terrifying, probably true. Have Hulsher or any other people looking at this question of how long does the spike persist in blood, right? Found like the 3.5 years, the 5 or 6 years, that's the length of time since the vaccine rollout. Have any of the people who have been mRNA vaccinated been tested and shown that their spike has cleared the body or is on a downward trajectory?
There's limited data. Dr. Peter McCullough has some data showing that his interventions have been associated with a reduction in that protein. But the fact of the matter is, Dr. Wolf, is that the government and the pharmaceutical companies will not fund our research.
Right.
They will not, I'm one of the founding members of Advanced Biological Research Group. We have 2 studies that need funding, and nobody will fund it. The NIH, the government, of course, pharmaceutical companies we're trying to look at private donors, but these are projects that are near and dear to your heart and my heart because they involve the future of reproductive, our children and our grandchildren and future generations. Nobody's looking at it.
This is making me so sad because I remember a year or 2 ago interviewing you and you were launching this initiative. And I was like, we need this. How do we get this funded? They're not going to fund you from the universities or from the governments or from the pharma companies. How do we get this funded? This is so important. Well, send me, the proposal or the website, and I'll send it, if you like, to a couple of generous donors that I know, because we definitely have to get this funded. And I want you right now, please, to tell people how to donate. Usually I save that for the end of the show, but I think it's very important right now for you to tell people how to donate, and then we'll circle back to it at the end of the show.
Right. Dr. Wolf, I can send you a one-pager summary of the 2 projects we're looking at, and I'll send it to you after this interview. But basically, if you go to abrg.org, Advanced Biological Research Group, and there are my colleagues and founders, Dr. Steve Hatfill, the other 2 obstetricians from Florida who are on our wavelength, Dr. Biss, Dr. Kimberly Biss, and Dr. Dan McDyer, and then Dr. Steve Hatfill, who is my age, a virologist. He's been in the White House with President Trump for both 45 and 47 and worked with Peter Navarro.
Right.
So he's a founding member as well, and he's a good friend. So we have discrete, important projects that have already been IRB approved, all set to go.
Wow.
We just need funding, and unfortunately, we don't have that.
How much do you need to raise? What is the figure that you need to raise in order to launch?
I can give you that one sheeter. I believe that to accomplish the project, it's going to be somewhere in the range of 1 to 1.5 million.
That's cheap for what humanity would get for funding this study. So you guys, you heard it here. You get the medicine you support, you get the journalism you support, you get the science you support. You have to go to this website. Give me the acronym again.
abrg.org. abrg.org.
Dig deeply, read the one pager, share it. This is literally nothing less than the future of humanity. I mean, I can't stress enough. You just heard there are 3 obstetricians in America that are trying to protect the next generation of babies from this issue, that surfaced in the last 5 or 6 years, and very distinguished people joining them. So you've got to help Dr. Thorpe and his colleagues with this. Now, let me go on to the next question. Are you saying, and it's interesting because I just got an email, actually text about this from a friend, a woman said, ask her if I can test for spike protein. Are you saying at this point in humanity's history, there is no test for spike protein?
Great question. What we're doing now with LabCorp and what Dr. McCullough and I are ordering and many others is a LabCorp test, which is an antibody that we measure the level of, an antibody that is specific for spike protein, but it's not a direct spike protein assay. That assay is available. It is available. There's at least 3 or 4 different companies that have validated a direct assay for the spike protein, but the FDA won't approve it. And they're validated and used in other countries.
Wow. So is it physically obtainable, even though it's not FDA approved? Is this something that the wellness company provides, or can people go elsewhere for it? No?
We can't provide it because it's not FDA approved. So it can only be used for research purposes.
So this is insane. Like literally it's 2026. It's 5 years after the rollout of this injection, and you can't check if your spike protein levels are.
Exactly. It's crazy.
It is crazy. I can't get over it. All right. Well, back to the blood supply. What you named a number of contaminants really in the blood supply. From what I heard, you named the plasmid problem, you named the spike, you named the mRNA, you named some of their impacts with microclotting, for example, which is so dangerous in blood, right? And presumably as dangerous in a transfusion. And when you said the jig would be up if they were testing for mRNA, which I can't even believe they're not, blood banks today, the American Blood Association, whatever it's called, I forgot. What's it called? The American Blood, those people. I cannot believe they're not testing. And they're not. Like, I remember calling in the middle of lockdowns to see what they were doing with vaccinated versus unvaccinated blood, and they wouldn't talk about it, and they won't separate them. They won't, like, there could be donors who are unvaccinated and you can't ask for that, you can't find them. So given this craziness, all of us have a risk of needing a blood transfusion. As you've just movingly stated, pregnant women are at a much, much, much higher risk of needing a blood transfusion. What can we do to protect ourselves, if anything?
Well, I think number one, we need to advocate for ourselves. If you are going into surgery, be like Dr. Naomi Wolf. Before her surgery, she advocated for herself, and she made sure she went through the hoops. She put her physician on notice that you wanted donor designated blood, or you wanted your own blood. So that's important.
They didn't do it, right? They didn't have the process. They didn't have the facilities. They wouldn't do it. I mean, I guess I could have spent more time and, digging up how to go about it. But I was not successful. Are there in every city facilities for keeping your own blood and bringing it to the operating room? I mean, just walk me through the practicalities of that, please, because I can't visualize it.
Well, first of all, let me say that I believe that it is a severe breach of medical ethics to not allow a patient to have autologous blood, that is their own blood,
Yeah.
or to not have donor designated blood. And that was standard of care before the pandemic. That was standard of care. And you and I have talked about the 4 pillars of medical ethics. Even the American Medical Association has an ethical statement about, medical ethics and patient autonomy. This is a breach of medical ethics to not allow a patient to have donor designated blood. Now, one of my co-authors on this paper, and he and I have been collaborating for a long time, and I think you'd love to meet him and probably be a great person to have on your show. He's a PhD like yourself, and his name is Dr. Clinton Ohlers, Ohlers, and he is one of the founders or presidents of safeblood.org.
Wow, I'm making notes. Safeblood.org. Wow.
.com. I'm sorry. The safeblood.org is Europe, and we're affiliated. He's affiliated with them. Safeblood.com is the United States of America. Now, they're not blood banks, but what they do is extremely important. If you live in a certain city in New York, and you contact them and say, hey, I want donor designated blood from a donor that's not been vaccinated, they have a whole list of people from your city that are willing to donate blood to you that are not vaccinated. And I've used them before.
They say there's someone who needs blood. Can you please come in and donate blood? And then they will. Is that how it works?
Yes.
Amazing.
Yes.
That's so smart.
Safeblood.com.
Wow. Thank heaven for them. You guys, this is such an important conversation. I did not know about them. They don't come up in search, which is really interesting because I really searched. And so they must operate in multiple cities, and you can let them know, I want a vaccine-free blood donor, and they'll arrange it. And then after that, how do you get the blood from that person or from that office or whatever to your surgeon safely, under refrigeration or whatever blood needs, please?
Okay. So again, this company, and there's other companies like them, at least one other I'm aware of, they don't take the blood, they don't store it. They simply connect the patient, and then the patient and that donor will need to go to the hospital and say, hey,
oh, wow.
This is my donor, I want the blood. Now, I've used this service, and I've used it at a hospital, a large hospital in Missouri, and my pregnant patient had a placenta previa, was at very high risk for losing blood. So she got connected. She called Clinton Ohlers and safeblood.com, and they connected her up with a local person in their more rural city in Missouri.
Amazing.
In Southwest Missouri.
What happens? The hospital says, okay, we'll take that person and we'll take their blood, and they have facilities to let the person lie down and give them orange juice, do all the things that banks do.
What they'll do, Dr. Wolf, is they still need the prescription and order from their doctor, and the prescription and order from their doctor, it will be arranged with the local blood bank, the same blood bank that the general blood supply comes from. And then they would tag that and say, okay, this is for Mrs. Jones.
Wow.
And she needs the blood for a surgery on such and such date. Wow. And so they go through regular channels, and then it would be in the usual manner, it would be transferred to the hospital blood bank, and the hospital would have it on hand for Mrs. Jones' surgery.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you so much for that information. And is that growing? Are people making use of that option to get unvaccinated blood. I remember early on someone joked that, unvaccinated blood and semen would be like gold on the black market by the time we were done with this period in human history. Or I don't know if it's
you're
growing,
right.
that demand for unvaccinated blood, the use of the blood bank, safeblood.com. It is growing.
It is growing, but here's the rate limiting factor, and this is very sad, and is that the vast majority of states and people, physicians and blood banks won't honor that. They'll gaslight the patients and say, no, we're not going to do it. And we've had many patients that have optioned to go elsewhere out of state, a state that is more amenable to providing this service. So there's many states that simply won't do it. Now, there's a famous case, and you can Google it, Baby W of New Zealand. If you Google that, you'll get a whole story. This is a couple, I believe, that needed blood either, I think, for a newborn, and I think that it went to the highest court, the Supreme Court of New Zealand, and they ruled that it was illegal, that they weren't allowed to have blood from a unvaccinated
donor. That is so crazy. That's so like Orwellian and intrusive. Like, you have to take this into your body, even if you've asked the highest court in the land to not take it into your body. That is deranged. Like, we have no freedom at all if we can't be free to specify what we do and don't want put into our bodies. Right?
There are several states and cities and hospitals in the United States of America that are doing the same thing. And I think that the psychology behind this and the cognitive dissonance behind this very clearly. The same reason why they won't provide a direct spike test. 80% of Americans took at least one vaccine about. So somebody that's been vaccinated, they don't want to be labeled. They don't want to acknowledge that they may have harmed themselves or harmed other patients. They want everybody to be the same. Right. So they want to make it go away. They want to play pretend like they did back with HIV, like they did with hepatitis C. HIV, I practiced during them. I saw, the results of this, kicking the can down the road. 12,000 Americans were infected with HIV from contaminated blood. Probably 8,000 or 9,000 hemophiliacs, a whole generation of hemophiliacs were killed from HIV contaminated, because why? They were using the plasma-derived the concentrates of the factors, the clotting factors that they were missing. So they were pooled derivatives of like factor VIII and others. So they were just almost had a high risk of contracting HIV and dying. So, this is of great concern. And in 1995, the American Academy of Sciences did a independent scientific review of the management of the government and the blood banks with HIV and with hepatitis C. And, I've looked some of those papers up. There was some damning criticism of the way that they manage that, because it's always profit over patient, always. And, those investigators were honest enough to publish that. But the decompensation in the ethics since 1995 in this country, they have skyrocketed, exponentially worsened. I think you would agree with that. And I'm sorry for the noise in the background. That's the Blue Angels flying in my backyard for their show.
That's very cool. No apology necessary. Isn't that a military thing?
Yes, Blue Angels are the they're Pensacola is the home of the Blue Angels, and the Blue Angels are probably the most world famous aeronautical. They fly F-18s for the Navy, and they're basically a precision flight team. And I'm sure most of your audience have seen or heard of the Blue Angels.
I'm sure I've seen videos of them. Well, no, we can't even hear them, but thank you. It's not audible to us, but that's very cool that they're nearby. Well, in our last few minutes, what is it that pregnant women, or often in my audience, the mothers-in-law or mothers of pregnant women, right, or dads or fathers-in-law, what should all these people know? What can they do to protect themselves? In addition to making contact with safeblood.com, certainly supporting your research, what else practically can they do to, especially if they're vaccinated, to have a healthy baby, to have a healthy pregnancy, to, or I'm thinking of young women that I know and love who haven't had babies yet, to keep their bodies in a state that is optimal for eventually having a healthy baby?
I think, first off, I'd just like to say that if there's anybody out there listening that believes that they've had a blood transfusion in the last few years after the rollout of the COVID vaccine, and you think that you had a reaction, I'd really like to hear from you. You can direct message me, or Dr. Wolf has my email, or you can contact me through drjamesthorpe.com. I'd really like to hear from you. In terms of my recommendations, is be your own advocate. You are your own best advocate. Do your research, do your due diligence, not only for yourself, but, we all know that moms and women are the health advocates for the family. Mm-hmm. Even their husbands that are doctors, they make all the medical decisions. So be the advocate for your husband, for your children, for your grandparents, your parents, and make wise decisions. Don't trust your doctor or the government. Right. They've been feeding a lot of misinformation for a long time and suppressing people that want to get the truth out, like Dr. Wolf and many other people, and we're silenced. But the government does not have a good track record, neither does the blood banking industry. Yeah. So be your own advocate.
That's great advice. And well, I know that there's a spike protein product, right? Or a product that helps to manage or diminish the impacts of spike that TWC offers. That's something that I know pregnant women aren't supposed to take anything, but women who want to get pregnant someday, can't they take that?
Yes.
To
yes. If you have been vaccinated, I would strongly recommend that you get through the LabCorp, the quantitative spike protein antibody, and that can only be obtained through LabCorp. And Dr. Wolf, I can provide you all the information on that so that you can put it in your show notes.
Thank you.
And if you have a high level, then I think it's very important to detox and try to clear that spike protein.
And at the risk of being repetitive, because this is a question I've been asking all of you pioneers and experts for the last 5 years, and the answers are, we know a little bit more every year. What are things people can do to detox from the spike in the mRNA? What can they do?
Well, I think that the honest answer to that is we don't know for certain, because nobody will fund the studies. It's taboo. It's like sweep it under the rug. We don't care about the vaccine injured. We don't care about the people that were killed by the vaccine. We're going to just sweep it under the rug. We're not going to fund any research, and we're just going to move forward and pretend it didn't happen. Right. That's the problem.
Well, let me ask this very practically. Your vaccinated, pregnant, or new mom patients, what have they done in terms of their lifestyle, the ones who are doing especially well? And what do you notice about the ones who aren't doing so well in terms of their lifestyle, nutrition, supplements, red light saunas, I don't know, sunlight, can you generalize at all, or is there no way to generalize?
No, I think that if you have a high spike titer, I think you use the ultimate spike detox from the wellness company. That's the most well-studied. And I would also do the best you can to eat very healthy, stay away from all highly refined foods, eat clean, stay away from sugar. Sugar is bad. Do exercise regularly. Work up a good sweat. Keep hydrated. I think certainly that has a potential for helping to clear the spike.
Those are great answers. All right. Thank heaven for you, Dr. Thorpe. Really. Do you see any young obstetricians kind of coming up that you're maybe mentoring who can carry the mission forward into the future?
I'm not seeing any young obstetricians, but I am mentoring a lot of young investigators and young physicians to open their eyes and to see more clearly avoid the Rockefeller type medical training and open your eyes to the truth. Open your eyes to the corruption of the medical journals, the corruption of science, the corruption of what you're taught in medical school. Virtually nothing on nutrition. You're told to memorize chemotherapies and memorize vaccines and don't question them. No, question everything. Do your own due diligence.
Right. Wonderful words, inspiring words. I'm going to make you one more time ask you one more time to repeat the website where people can donate for your all-important independent research mission to get the real science done so we can save ourselves. What's that location again?
It is abrg.org. It's an acronym for Advanced Biological Research Group, abrg.org.
And we'll put the link in our show notes as well to make sure that everyone who watches this knows where to go. Again, I usually ask you guys to donate to us, but this time for this show is devoted to Dr. Thorpe and his colleagues and their research efforts, because we can't let our kids and grandchildren come into a world where this research is not funded. This is life and death of the human race. I don't think that's overstating it. So Dr. Thorpe, you've been so generous. And again, thank you for your patience with my technical issues earlier. I can't thank the Wellness Company enough for being a sponsor of our show and of having the wisdom to have such extraordinary heroes, pioneers, medical and scientific luminaries as you and your colleagues at the Wellness Company. I'm now going to remove you with great thanks so I can thank our sponsors and tell people where to go to get the things we talked about. So I'm going to say goodbye to you now, Dr. Thorpe. Till next time.
Thank you for having me on.
Thank you so much. Take care. Oh, wow, everyone. You heard it here. And there's Loki, who always loves to be in the shot. The Wellness Company, they're such pioneers in so many things. But one of the things I want you to really pay attention to is that that's where you get the spike detox that Dr. Thorpe was talking about at dailyclouthealth.com, and use code dailyclout. And really, if you've got loved ones who are vaccinated, it is the most studied supplement to mitigate the negative effects of the spike protein, I highly recommend it. There's something else that the Wellness Company is innovating. When credible doctors start paying attention to repurposed medications, it's worth asking why. Dr. Harvey Risch, former professor of epidemiology at Yale and now serving on the president's cancer panel, is helping to lead that conversation. A new groundbreaking observational study from the Wellness Company analyzed the off-label use of ivermectin and mebendazole in nearly 200 cancer patients treated by licensed doctors across cancers such as breast, prostate, lung, and colon, and the results are hard to ignore. After 6 months, 84% of patients experienced clinical benefit, including stable disease, tumor regression, or no evidence of disease at all. This is not lab data. This is real-world patient experience. Dr. Risch, chief epidemiologist at the Wellness Company, called it an exciting signal deserving serious scientific investigation and more accessible, lower-cost cancer care options. That is why the Wellness Company makes it easy to access an ivermectin and mebendazole formula using medications that are FDA approved for other indications and are being studied for additional use. It is doctor prescribed and USA compounded, designed to support patients exploring these emerging approaches under medical guidance. Ordering is simple and fully digital. Just fill out a quick intake form. A licensed doctor reviews it, and your prescription ships directly to your door. Head to dailyclouthealth.com. That's dailyclouthealth.com, and use code dailyclout to save up to $60 off plus free shipping. Very important. Worth knowing about. Loki always wants to be in the shot. Come here, baby. Well, he's just stretching. He won't come sit in my lap. That's okay. Something I've been thinking about as we've been having these conversations is not just what's happening in our institutions or in the economy, but what people actually do with their awareness of what's happening. I hear from a lot of people who see what's going on in the instability in the world, the corruption in our institutions. And yet when it comes to their own savings, their own retirement, are still locked into those same systems. It's not usually due to a lack of understanding. It's more a kind of hesitation, the space between knowing something and deciding to act on it. Sometimes people look back on that hesitation with regret. Brian and I do, because if we'd invested in gold 5 years ago, we would have doubled our investment. What I'm noticing more and more is that some people are starting to shift their thinking away from trying to predict everything and more toward asking simply, how exposed am I to risk? And for some people, that leads them to explore ways to hold a portion of their savings outside of traditional financial systems, including in such investments as physical gold. I've been speaking to Augusta Precious Metals about this, and I appreciate that they approach this from an educational perspective. They take time to walk people through how investing in gold works, what to consider, and whether it even makes sense for that individual situation. And they do this without exerting any pressure. If you want to look into this more carefully, which I really recommend, go to dailycloutgold.com or text clout to 35052 and ask for Augusta's free information kit. It's a way to understand your options more clearly so that when you do make a decision, you do so from a place of awareness rather than hesitation. And again, that's dailycloutgold.com or text clout, C-L-O-U-T, to 35052 and ask for Augusta Gold's free information kit. What would you do without us, you guys? Again, if you value these conversations, you really have to support independent journalism, and you do that by going over to Substack and looking for Naomi Wolf's Outspoken, subscribing there, or Best of Daily Clout. You can subscribe to that too on Substack, and go over to dailyclout.io and become a subscriber or give a one-time donation. As I always say, you get the journalism you support, you get the medicine and the science you support, and you have to support independent journalism like ours if you are going to be healthy, free, and not not depressed and at the mercy of tyrants. I'll just put it that way. I love you guys. Thank you for joining me here on Outspoken. And